So before we get started with their presentation, I'd actually just like to quickly talk about Dr. Krishnan's research team, which, as Justin had stated, is partnered with this amazing support group here. So just to quickly summarize, our research operates right out of Emory University, uh, where Justin and I both study as undergraduates, and we focused on what we call patient-centered outcomes research. And some topics that we study include young stroke, mild stroke, comparing effectiveness of rehab following stroke across various settings, and the management of caregiver burden following neurological conditions. Okay, so I'd like to now introduce our wonderful guest speaker, Ariella Kaplan. Ariella is a speech language pathologist in the Atlanta area with nearly a decade of clinical experience in various settings. She began her career in a specialized high school for students with learning differences and executive functioning deficits. Her passion for the brain injury population grew during her 5+ years at the Shepherd Center's outpatient setting. She started her private practice, Atlanta Speech and Wellness, in order to provide person-centered care in people's homes and through telehealth. She combines specialized speech, language, and cognitive therapy with wellness educations for adults and adolescents who have sustained an acquired brain injury. Her mission is to improve the overall well-being of individuals living with brain injuries and help them get back to doing what they love through personalized rehabilitation. So before we start, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your mic during the presentation, unless, of course, you have a question or comment, and this will just help us prevent any unnecessary noise or feedback. So I will now hand the mic over to you,
All
Ariella.
right. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am going to quickly share my screen so that we can get started. Let's see. All right. Did that work?
Yes, looks good.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I can't see anyone's faces or my own, so the voices help tremendously. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for that introduction and for having me here tonight. I am so grateful to be here and happy to see so many people on the call. Aphasia truly is a mystery to so many. So having this opportunity to raise some awareness to the disorder and the struggle that many people go through really is critical for the community. So thank you, Roger and the YNR team for organizing this. Before I get started, I want to make sure I can see everyone's faces and it's not showing it right now, but I really want to make sure that this is interactive and I have some questions for everybody. So give me just a minute to try and figure out how to do that. Show video panel. Aha. Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. All right, so topics of this presentation. The biggest topic in what we're going to be talking about today is aphasia. I'm going to review exactly how common it is, and then we're going to talk about the different types, as well as communication strategies. I'll provide you with some resources and take-home notes. And then we'll touch on how to live well with a brain injury. And this really pertains to everybody, but especially after you've sustained any kind of acquired brain injury, whether you have aphasia or you're living with some cognitive deficits or any changes since your injury. So, a little more background. Again, my name is Ariella. I'm an SLP that specializes in neurological disorders, and I provide speech, language, and cognitive therapy to adults and adolescents after an acquired brain injury. Like Chris said, I worked at Shepherd Center outpatient rehab setting called Shepherd Pathways. I cannot say enough amazing things about the Shepherd Center. If you've been there, you know. And it's also where my passion for this population grew. I also am a certified mindfulness instructor through UCSD's Center for Mindfulness, and as well as a certified Ayurvedic health counselor. Part of my passion for that holistic point of view and my desire to incorporate that into my therapy is what led me to start my private practice at Atlanta Speech and Wellness. My overall goal is always to help my clients and their families live as well as possible and get back to doing what it is that they love. So we're going to do a little exercise just to get into the understanding of what it may feel like to have a word finding or communication deficit if you're a caregiver, or if you've never heard of aphasia, or maybe you didn't experience aphasia after your injury. So what I'd like for you to do, if you feel comfortable, potentially closing your eyes if you're comfortable, and imagine going to a foreign country where you do not speak the language, or you only remember a few words from your high school or college language course. You would have difficulty saying what you mean, understanding what others were saying to you, reading the language and writing things down. Something as simple as ordering food at a restaurant may cause you a significant amount of stress or confusion. And something that simple might help you provide or feel a little bit of insight into what it might be like to have aphasia. But even more so, I want you to now imagine that as hard as you try, you can't seem to get the word out. This might be a familiar feeling. When you listen to your spouse talking, it's almost like they're speaking in a different language. Maybe you look at your watch to check the time, but for some reason the numbers don't seem to make sense. Or when you're out to eat with friends, you tend to nod along, but really you're not really following along in the conversation, or you're having a hard time understanding what someone's saying. And lastly, maybe you try to say your name, but the words and the sounds don't really add up together and you can't form the sounds to say your own name. If your eyes were closed, you can open them. These are some of the realities that persons with aphasia face daily. Aphasia is a disorder everyone should know about. And during this presentation, you'll learn just how common it is, and unfortunately, how little the public knows about it. So let's get started. I want to get a feel for who's in the audience. If you feel comfortable sharing, of course, I was going to ask if you can post on a scale of 1 to 10 in the chat box. I think if everyone knows how to access the chat. 1 being you have never heard of the term aphasia before this presentation. And 10 being you are super familiar with aphasia, you know everything there is to know. Where do you fall? How well do you understand aphasia right now? My next question is, have you or a loved one been diagnosed with aphasia? If you feel comfortable sharing. My next question and last one is, has anyone here ever struggled finding their words? Maybe not something that you would call aphasia, but me too. Yeah, I see hands being raised. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that tip of the tongue. So even though the people on this call are very familiar with aphasia, or the most of us are, actually 86.2% of people have never even heard of the term, which is crazy. And this came from the National Aphasia Association, their 2020 survey. And there is a significant disconnect because there are more than 2.5 million people living in the US alone with aphasia. And actually 1 out of 3 stroke survivors will have aphasia. And aphasia seems uncommon because it's not commonly talked about. The people who have aphasia have trouble talking, so they struggle to get the word out and communicate this problem and raise awareness. Okay, so what is aphasia exactly? Well, simply put, it is a language disorder. And language is comprised of 4 main components. There's speaking, our verbal output, listening and understanding words, reading, and writing. And aphasia can affect all or just some of these areas of language. And what we don't realize is language, of course, is an essential part of our lives that we often take for granted. With it, we can communicate our thoughts and feelings. We can lose ourselves in novels. We can send a quick text message and greet friends. So it really is hard for most people to imagine being unable to turn our thoughts into words. However, as some of you know, if the delicate web of language networks in our brains, mainly found in that left hemisphere, become disrupted by a stroke, an illness, or any other kind of trauma, you could find yourself truly at a loss for words. And stroke is the most common cause of aphasia. However, it's not the only one. I have some other ones listed here. I found this graphic to be really nice just to explain a little bit about, if you know where your injury is or where your stroke happened, the type of aphasia that you might see. So this area here in blue is Broca's area, and that is mostly responsible for the communication of words, so language production. And people that have a stroke in this particular area might present as really choppy speech or have a difficult time finding words. It'll come out much slower. Whereas this yellowy orange area here, Wernicke's area, that is where the person has a difficult time comprehending or processing language or words. So sometimes just one area is affected, but not always. It can be the two, and we'll find out more about that. Do I have any questions about this before we move on? Okay. So someone with aphasia may have difficulty with some of the following areas. They may have a hard time understanding what other people say, using the right word to express a thought, reading aloud or silently, understanding what one reads, writing, typing, using numbers or drawing. However, anyone who has experienced aphasia knows that it goes much deeper than this. It truly hits at the core of what makes us human, right? Connection is communication, right? So we communicate and we connect with people, and that connection is severed. So that leaves the person with aphasia often feeling confused, frustrated, and sometimes isolated. And for that reason, one of the most important and essential pieces of recovery include participating in support groups like this one. So thank you, Roger, again for putting this together. I do want to say, and I'll say multiple times as we move forward, that it is incredibly important to remember that people who have aphasia remain as intelligent as ever. They know what they want to say. They have the thoughts in their minds, but they can't seem to get the words to come out correctly. And aphasia will affect everyone in different ways. Just because two people have aphasia, the same type of stroke, does not mean that you're going to see the same exact type of things that they struggle with. So I mentioned types. There are many different types, and people can be across the continuum here. And they also vary in severity. So each type can vary. But I know this is a lot to look at, but I really like this graphic from the National Aphasia Association. So what it's saying is, if you follow along, if we start all the way up at the top here, and you ask yourself these three questions. If the answer to each one is yes, you're gonna follow along in the red. If it's no, you go towards the gray. So the first question to ask is the person's speech fluent? Do words come out effortlessly, and they can communicate and find those words enough to keep a conversation going? And if the answer there is yes, you come down here, and then you might ask, can that person comprehend spoken messages? Is there any difficulty understanding what they hear? And if the answer is yes, then you keep going down here again, and then can they repeat words or phrases? If it's yes, you come down here to anomic aphasia. Anomic aphasia is our most mild form of aphasia, and it's someone, Roger, if you don't mind me using you as an example, like Roger, who might only struggle every once in a while in conversation to find the words, where you feel comfortable in maybe an environment with a lot of people, but only at that conversational level, every once in a while does that word escape you. On the other end of the spectrum is global aphasia, where this person struggles significantly with both spoken and receptive language, so understanding words. And if you see, there's some that are underlined in green. There's global, Broca's, Wernicke's, and anomic. These are our most common or well-studied types of aphasia that we see a lot. And I showed you in that graphic earlier, Broca's area. And when that area is impacted, we see Broca's aphasia with a more choppy speech, and Wernicke's with fluent speech, but a difficulty with understanding. Okay. Quickly, I'm going to talk about some things that aphasia is not. So as we saw earlier, it really is not a rare disorder. It's actually more prevalent and common than disorders like Parkinson's or cerebral palsy or MS, things that we hear about all the time. So I'm glad that we have this opportunity to try to raise some more awareness. And then also it is, like I said before, it is not a loss of intelligence. The language centers of your brain is separate from that. Often we might see it, depending on the level of trauma, some other difficulties with some cognitive things like remembering things or paying attention, but aphasia is not that. And the tricky thing is when someone can't speak well, it's unfortunately easy for others to assume that they're not bright. But with aphasia, this is definitely not the case. So it's always important to presume competence and intelligence. Also, it is not fixed in presentation. While we know there is no cure for aphasia, it can always improve. I don't care how far post you are, it can always improve. And undamaged parts of the brain can take over for damaged parts, and new cells can be learned. New skills can be learned. And I've had several clients who have initially presented with Broca's aphasia, which might be considered more severe than anomic, which is considered more severe. And then over time and with therapy, and as they progress, they're categorized as more of an anomic aphasia. And so speech therapy can help improve language skills, as well as training communication partners and developing some strategy use to improve quality of life, but it's not fixed. And on the communication partner note, aphasia does not only affect the person impaired, it can be just as heartbreaking for friends and family members of that loved one, but also the need to learn new ways to communicate falls on their shoulders as well. And it's truly important for everyone that's surrounding you in the community to find ways to communicate and to help communication be more successful. So I'm going to show you a video. This is a young woman who is 19 named Sarah, and she suffered a stroke that resulted in aphasia. This is within the first year of her stroke. And as you watch, I want you to think about how she communicates and see if you can quiz yourself, for all my experts in here who know aphasia or more familiar, to see what type of aphasia you think she has. Okay, and we're just going to watch about a minute.
Okay, so what's your name?
Scott. Oh, no. Sarah Scott.
That's right. And how old are you?
I can't.
Try.
I can't.
Oh. You're 19. 19.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened to you?
Stroke.
You had a stroke last year.
Yes.
And what happened? Can you remember what happened?
school and English class,
Okay.
and I book and I read it aloud, but I can't because stroke, and so I send and also it's the same as the same of kind of thing as
I'm gonna just stop there. And before you tell me your guesses for what type of aphasia you think she has, if you want to see more of her, this woman, Sarah Scott, has shared her entire journey after her stroke. So every year she's put up videos so you can see the progress she has made. And it's really pretty eye-opening to watch how far she's come. So, okay, I'm gonna have this chart up here for everybody, just so for those that need it. Does anyone want to type in the chat or say verbally what type of aphasia they think she might have? Yes. Yes, I see so many different, yes, Broca's is correct. And let me show you why. So if we start up here and we ask, was her speech fluent? Right? So were words coming out the way that we're talking in complete sentences is what I mean by fluent. Can she communicate in sentences? And no, she was non-fluent, so it was definitely more telegraphic. Scott, 19, stroke, so it was one word at a time. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing some. So it was not considered non-fluent, so no, we come over here. But then we asked, does the person comprehend spoken messages? So was she at least, could you tell she understood the question and was trying to respond appropriately? Yeah, so she was saying, what's your name? What happened? So Sarah was understanding the language. She was understanding what that person was saying to her. And then someone said, no one said transcortical. We don't technically know whether she's good at repeating yet. Typically people with Broca's aphasia, if I were to say, repeat after me, umbrella, that word would be really tricky to come out. So they might not be able to say umbrella after me. This young woman had Broca's aphasia, so that repetition was difficult for her, which you didn't see in the video. So we're gonna look at Sarah Scott and see how much she has changed after 10 years. If you remember her speech in the beginning, we're gonna just watch a brief clip of her as she's progressed.
Hello, my name is Sarah. This is my anniversary video. I'm a bit late. Normally my anniversary is in May, but I've been really busy this year, so I'm sorry that it's after Christmas this year. But thank you for watching my video.
So this year you've done quite a lot of raising awareness and talking about aphasia and how it affects your life. You did a talk at the Royal Society, which is a really huge institution in London.
Okay, quick little snippet, but I did want you to hear that she was starting to present and give talks at this World Conference in front of scientists. What did you guys notice about the difference in her language? So I like this too, because you truly can see that, once you have aphasia and someone tells you, oh, you have Broca's aphasia, or you have this type of aphasia, or you just have aphasia, that doesn't mean that that's set in stone. There is always progress to be made, and it can shift and change. Now, I know I'm showing you a lot of videos. This is my last one, but I find this is the sweetest man, Byron, who has Wernicke's aphasia, which is very different from what we've been seeing. This is a fluent type of aphasia. Has anyone here have a fluent aphasia? If you feel comfortable sharing at the end, or I'm guessing maybe it was a loved one, feel free to talk towards the end when there's time. But this is Byron, who has fluent Wernicke's aphasia.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
So we're on a cruise and we're about to
We
get to
will store it
Juneau.
right here and they'll save their hands right there for them.
And what were we just doing with the iPad?
Right at the moment, they don't show a darn thing.
With the iPad that we were doing. Like here?
I'd like my change for me and change hands for me. And with happening, I would talk with Donna sometimes. We're out with them. Other people are working with them. I'm very happy with them.
Good.
This girl was very good and happy. And I play golf and hit other trees. We play out with the hands. We save a lot of hands on hold for us, other hands. I don't know what you get, but I talk with a lot of hand for him. Sometime. Am I talk of any more to saying?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope the world lasts for you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
All right. But as you can see, aphasia, wow, it varies tremendously. Okay, so now we got to talk about the tips and what we can do once we have aphasia. So first, some tips for people with aphasia. Of course, as a speech therapist, I'm going to tell you speech therapy can always help improve communication. But in the meantime, it's helpful to set up the environment to really maximize your potential for success. And the first thing I would say is minimize your background noise. Turn off that TV in the background, and try to talk in a quiet room as much as possible, especially if it's an important conversation. I know, like when you're out at a restaurant, there's only so much, restaurant these days, outside somewhere, but there's only so much that you can control. But as much as possible, trying to decrease the cognitive load and focusing on one thing at a time. On top of that, I also would remind you to think back to that like foreign language exercise where I said, imagine you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language. If you wanted to ask someone on the streets how to get to a certain restaurant, you wouldn't just use words, right? You might use gestures or facial expressions or pull up a map on your phone or a picture. So thinking about all the nonverbal stuff that you can to help get your intended message across. And then lastly, making sure that you are kind to yourself. So going easy on yourself because you're trying your best, and truthfully, talking is very difficult for a person with aphasia. So be kind. And then I also have some word finding strategies that we train and teach in speech therapy for those times when you really can't think of that word. And there's, in this example, I'm using scissors as the word we can't think, but using some strategies like just adding a delay. So that might look like you just say to the person, 1 second, what is that thing, that word? So in a way, you're kind of delaying it. Tell them you need a minute. And then maybe that pause can give you that time to process and connect and find that word, scissors, in this example. You have any, 1 second, scissors. Describing it can also help. So saying things like, those things that cut. Giving them an association. So saying things like, they're not knives, but they're like that. All of these word finding strategies can help you and your brain kind of find that word and where it's tucked away by talking about things it's associated with, but it can also help your communication partner and the listener say, oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, you're looking for scissors, which however way the message comes out, there's a successful exchange there. So whichever works. Another strategy is using synonyms. Sometimes the person with aphasia might be able to say, clippers, or narrowing it down and providing a category. I'm over here. So you might say, their office supplies. I had one client who this strategy worked for her every time. She had a hard time with reading, but she could always see that for some reason the first letter of the word, and just kind of tracing it in the air somehow helped her connect that word and pull out the word scissors. So she knew that what S looked like, and then scissors would come out, which was really, yeah. I quickly wanted to just share some of my favorite language exercise apps and games, just in case there's anyone here that wants some more, exercise at home. This app, Talk Path Therapy, I know we use a lot in speech therapy. It is completely free, and they have so many different exercises to practice strengthening your language skills. It's website therapy.aphasia.com. Free account you can create. If you have a therapist, you can link it to them where they can track your progress, make things more challenging for you, and assign homework. And then Tactus Therapy app is also an awesome app that has a light version for free. But it was created by an SLP, so I really do love this one. But there are so many great exercises and games out there, whether it's just reading is a good language exercise, but these are things that can track your progress. And then my last tip, oh man, I have so much to go through, I just realized. But my last tip for people with aphasia is joining a support group like this one and practice, talk, communicate. I know that's so much easier said than done, but like Roger said at the beginning of this is such a welcoming, wonderful environment where people get it. I'm just the clinician too, so while I've seen it and I am really dedicating my life to helping everybody, there is a different connection that you guys have together. And the crux of this meeting is not me, it's really what happens after. So I'm hoping I will get through all of this so you guys can really talk and the important stuff happens. One more video, but this is such a good one. This kind of touches on how communication partners can help their spouse or loved one communicate and really reveal their competence. So I do want to say before we watch that when you train the caregiver or the family member to communicate with someone with aphasia, you can really truly reveal the competence of that person. And they don't have to do anything differently. They just interact with you, and suddenly you see, oh yeah, they are understanding me, or they are able to express themselves just when I do something differently, when I present something differently. And in a sense, what I think of this is as we are giving people with aphasia a ramp. And what I mean by this is when we see people with physical disabilities using wheelchairs, we provide them with a ramp to get in and out of buildings, right? So that they can continue to participate in their lives. And with aphasia, it's not something you see. So if you think about it, even though we're giving them this ramp, that doesn't mean that we're not still working on their walking skills. Our hope and our goal is still for them to walk through the door. But ultimately, we're just giving them a means of doing it now while we work on doing it better later. So by all means, get someone to communicate now. Caregivers, partners, learn how to communicate with your loved one and use strategies. A speech therapist does this, and it takes a lot of training. It's not super intuitive. So I'm going to show you a video of a really good communication partner. The exchange is still difficult between the two of them. I mean, the message is hard to get across, but she is doing a really nice job using strategies to help him. So 1 minute here.
Wire bags.
Oh, are you talking
Yes.
about
When we were kids, down near Bellins and Sullivan's, and we were Jefferhans. We were kids.
Is it Whitewater?
No.
Not
no.
Six Flags.
Rayford Hands is exactly right there. really friends?
Sandy Springs.
It's this kind of. It was a Marsons.
And it was a something with water.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, but just it's
I didn't grow up that way.
U.S. Meads.
I went with you.
And when we were kids, we went all the way down in here.
Chattahoochee.
It's
gonna be a long one.
Because I'm just kind of confident. Yeah, that is where I used to count us. But you and me.
So it's a place you and Amy went.
I mean, literally, there's one.
What happened at that place? Give us more clues.
What did we do there?
So you were.
Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm going to stop there. It's really a great video, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you think she did that you noticed it could be helpful for her husband? Yeah. Yes, clues. She gave him clues. She wrote it down. All of that really helped him. So when you're working with someone with aphasia, trying to figure out their strengths, and this man, reading and writing was one of his strengths. Yeah, that helped him understand and communicate. She got up and she showed him. Yeah, definitely. They used an iPad to show pictures, looking at a map. So all of these are some of my, I'm going to run through these, but were some of my tips. Communicating in a quiet spot, they're one-on-one. She gives him context cues and provides a clear topic. Also speaking slowly and naturally, not raising your voice, but also using short and simple sentences, although being careful not to talk down to someone. Summarizing and rephrasing, she did a lot of this. Writing things down. My clients with aphasia, I almost always have caregivers always have like a notepad with them. A notepad, paper, and for the ones that can really write well, everywhere they go, they take a notepad too, so that if their word's not coming out, they can at least attempt to write it out so someone can see and understand. And then pausing and giving ample time for a response. And if you think you've given them enough time to respond, count to 3 again, at least, and really give a lot of wait time, because it's hard to be quiet sometimes, but really practicing, patient. And then quickly just making sure you're still encouraging their efforts, but at the same time also admitting when you don't understand what they're trying to say. It's important not to just kind of nod along and say, okay. Being honest. And then don't expect perfection. Aphasia can be really frustrating and tiring. So it's important to give that person plenty of time to really express themselves. And if they make several unsuccessful attempts at the word, that's okay. Let them take a break and maybe come back at it. But as long as the message, if you receive the message and what they're trying to tell you clicks, but it's not said perfectly, that's fine. I would just let it be. And then sometimes just saying something when they're struggling, saying, I know you know. Because when your loved one is trying to say something, just acknowledging their intellect and that they understand and that the frustration is there can really mean the world to them. So a simple phrase like that can really help. And I'm going to hold off on this one because it sounds like it might be something that we'll talk about at the end with Roger. So be thinking about this. What has worked best for you with a caregiver, and what are some things that don't work when someone's trying to help you? What do you prefer? And then here are some resources to take home that have tremendous and amazing, wonderful material, as well as education, advocacy services. The National, get the full versions. Yes, the National Aphasia Association is awesome for both people with aphasia and for families. Aphasia Recovery Connection, that is an awesome support group, actually the largest online support group for people specifically with aphasia. The more the merrier. So YNR, Aphasia Recovery Connection, Sometimes for people with aphasia, it feels a little bit better and more comfortable to talk to other people that have similar struggles with communicating. So this is that's a good resource too. And then, like I said, Tactus Therapy has great apps, but also online blogs and handouts and all free stuff on there. Okay, I'm sorry, Roger. I know we're coming to my time. So please tell me if you want to cut me off, but I'm going to try to go through this living well with brain injury.
No, go ahead. Okay.
As quickly as I can. All right, so living well with brain injury, your daily routine matters. And yes, this is always and has always been the case, but especially now after a brain injury, it's really something you want to be thinking about and taking into account. You probably did have a really good rhythm or routine to an extent, maybe a morning routine, or you went to work. You had some sort of schedule before your injury. And now you may have to kind of shift things or problem solve a little bit and figure out a new schedule or a new way of life that works best for you. So my biggest tip is to really spend time on, it doesn't have to be set in stone on one day, but really spending time to think about your routine and literally writing out, maybe with the help of someone, writing out a home schedule. Because it's one thing to really have the idea of it in your mind, but it's another to see the plan written out in front of you. Okay, so this, a lot on one page, but it is an exercise that we did with almost all of our patients at Pathways, Shepherd Pathways, before they left, because we never wanted anyone without therapy to be home without any kind of routine or schedule. And this work came from an SLP, Gina, and also a good friend. So she shared this with us. This is what she used. And she says, one way to tackle living well is to develop a home schedule or a daily routine. It's if we are mindful about our time, we can accomplish our goals, stay organized, reduce stress, and improve our overall quality of life. And one thing I didn't really mention, just to tie it back into aphasia, is reducing our stress and knowing what to expect and not having things thrown at us randomly can really help improve our language skills. I did a lot of research actually with the use of mindfulness meditation with aphasia patients, as well as some of my professors over at UGA. And we saw a significant amount of improvement with our verbal communication skills and those that learned how to control their stress levels and kind of tap into the breath and be present and reduce that frustration. So the first step to developing a home schedule is making a list of all the possible items that you may want to complete in various categories. So I have some examples just to give you an idea. So in a daily schedule, you might want to include, sit down and make a list of some exercises that you like to do. Walking, stretching, yoga, chair yoga. I'm not sure what's going on. Or home tasks. So things that no one really loves doing, like dishes, but it's things that need to get done. Appointments, speech therapy, PT, things that you do to relax, like meditate, doing a puzzle, reading, fun activities, and community activities. And then literally sitting down and trying to plug them into a daily routine or time slots. And what I'd like to add is that in your daily routine, you want to keep in mind the 6 pillars of brain health. And the 6 pillars are something that come from the Cleveland Clinic, and you can learn more about them on healthybrains.org. But these are and have been shown to be critical for cognitive health and especially important for preventing any kind of cognitive decline, but especially after a brain injury, when we want to keep our brain as healthy as possible, all of these things are critical to include and be thinking about. So physical exercise, we know exercise improves blood flow and memory and cognitive functioning. It stimulates chemical changes in the brain. and it enhances our learning, our mood, and our thinking. I know after an injury, everyone's physical limitations may be different, and the way that you exercise or move your body may be different. It is however you find a way to move or get your heart rate up a little bit. It's critical to include that in that daily routine as much as you can. And that doesn't need to be some kind of crazy CrossFit workout. Food and nutrition, very important, because eating well can really help you think better. And there's been more and more research out there to support the connection between the gut and the brain. So what we eat can really impact the way that we think. And as Roger said last month, y'all had a wonderful guest speaker that spoke specifically to this topic. This is not my specialty. So I would highly recommend and encourage you guys to go back and see the recording because food and nutrition are critical. And then the third pillar is medical health. Now, unfortunately, having a stroke or a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury, can put you at a higher risk for having another. So controlling medical risks, checking blood pressure, controlling hypertension or high cholesterol is critical. And making sure that you're going to your annual checkups, following your doctor's recommendations, and taking medications as prescribed is essential. And you know, Sonia talked about the difference between stroke and brain injury and how it kind of all gets lumped in. So even traumatic brain injuries are at a higher risk for another traumatic brain injury. So it is still something, this medical health is something that I want you to be keeping in mind and making sure you're keeping equipped. Okay, and then sleep and relaxation. So we know sleep energizes you, it improves your mood and your immune system. Doing things like practicing meditation, managing stress levels, and establishing a good, consistent pre-bedtime sleep routine can help tremendously. All of these things are so much easier to talk about than actually do. If you have a hard time with any of these, enlisting some professionals to help you incorporate them into your day-to-day, it is definitely something I would recommend. And then mental fitness. So what is this? This is, I want you to keep in mind the phrase, use it or lose it, basically. So you want to be cognitively active. Mental exercise is just as critical as physical exercise in keeping your brain fit and healthy. So things like reading, puzzles, speech therapy exercises that you might be given from your speech therapist, or even real life things like preparing and planning a meal, all of this takes a mental workout, takes cognitive exercise. And a caveat to the use it or lose it, I would say if you were to think about wanting to, you know, get stronger and go to the gym and get stronger muscles, you don't just go to the gym and lift 2-pound weights every day, right? So you don't just use it or lose it. You want to use it and improve it. Once you've mastered those 2 pounds, then maybe you go up to 2.5 pounds, and then maybe you go up to 3 pounds. And the same goes for mental exercise. So once one task becomes too easy for you, to really make any kind of changes in the brain, you need to be constantly challenging yourself. So once it's too easy, find something that's more challenging. And then our last pillar is social interaction. And it's truly critical to stay connected, and Roger touched on this. But leading an active social life can protect you against cognitive decline, spending time with others, engaging in stimulating conversations, and staying in touch and connected with family and friends are all really good and critical for your brain health. And then lastly, speech therapy can help as well. And the majority of the speech therapists that I know really do incorporate this whole wellness outlook and way of treating their patients, because our main goal is for our clients to improve their cognitive skills and become more independent and improve their quality of life. So anyone that is on the call, if you do want to explore speech therapy, I I'm happy to do free consultations and goal setting sessions. So, or if you just have questions about today, please feel free to reach out. I know Roger can give you guys my contact information. So I am here if you need me.